Welcome, everybody. My name is Nick Murray with Bitewing Games. You probably don't recognize me on the YouTube channel, but we have taken over for this video. There's no Kyle to be seen. Dad is out. He's, I don't know, and the kids are causing mischief. So, and I'm joined today by none other than my friend Scott. Scott, welcome.
Hello. It's nice to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. And the reason that we are suddenly hijacking the Bitewing Games YouTube channel and with my special guest here, Scott, is that today we have a very special event that we've been preparing for probably a year, right? I messaged you last year about this, I believe.
It's definitely been ruminating for a long time and has spurred the purchase of many of these games that I've tried.
This video has been in the making, not just for a year, but for decades, because we needed Dr. Reiner Knizia to design and have published over 700 games for us to mine through, especially over these last several years and months to catch up on. And so what we are bringing to you today is the ultimate Reiner Knizia ranked board games tier list. Okay. So you better buckle up, because how many games do we have on this list? Do you know exactly?
There were 161 files that I uploaded to this. So 161, give or take a few relatively close versions here or there.
Man, 161 different published Reiner Knizia games, some of which are, as you say, re-implementations or even just reskins. But for the most part, all unique games. Now, I believe that I have played, I have over 500 plays of Knizia games in total. And let's see how many games I've played. I've played over 126 is what the stats is telling me, but I think it's actually closer to 129 or 130, because this hasn't updated for me in a while. And that's just published games. So the ones that we're going to talk about today. So yes, indeed. And I know you're over 100 played, right?
Yeah,
different games.
I think I'm at, I had the, oh, actually, no, I do have the numbers, but I can't access them right now, except I've got my laptop right here. Because you asked me about that. I'm one of those people that does not keep track of my plays.
Shame.
And yes, you definitely let me know about that. I feel ashamed. But I went through the games that I played and estimated, and my estimated count was, for when it comes to plays, around 450.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, you're very close behind me then.
Oh yeah. And then like the average plays per game is about 4.5, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm somewhere in that ballpark. I actually haven't looked at those stats. So
and then I've played 106 from my
count. Nice. Oh, nice. Yeah, so we could have made, I guess, a top 100 Reiner Knizia games, but the Dice Tower actually did a very excellent video on this very recently, Tom and Mike, where they ranked from 100 to 1 their 100 favorite Knizia games. And if you haven't seen that, I do recommend you check it out, although I will note that they are wrong. So I mean, that's why we're here, to right their wrongs.
It's going to be one of the main themes of this video, I think, is you're wrong, I'm right. That's why I think we got both of us here, so that both of us can be right. And so at least, if I alienate half the audience, you'll have that half in your pocket. And so we'll actually please everybody.
That's right. Or we'll make everybody ticked off at us, either the two or both. But that's the cool thing about Reiner Knizia games is one man's trash is another man's treasure. He doesn't design every game to be for everybody. He designs it to be for a specific audience, and sometimes that is us, and sometimes it's not, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So what we plan to do here is we have things mostly ordered in alphabetical order here, starting with the very first game, Africa, and we're going to be slotting these games into our ranked tier list. But before we jump right into that, we're going to go through our different rankings so you have a better idea of what we mean when we say that, I don't know, that Galaxy Cat extension is platinum tier, for example.
I hear that doesn't exist, but
doesn't exist.
It can exist in your heart.
In your heart, indeed. So here are our tiered rankings here, starting with gold tier. Now, gold is actually an acronym which stands for Greatest of the Only Living Doctor. So this is the cream of the crop, okay? You have to be a very, very, very good Knizia game to get onto this list. And have a very special place in our hearts. Isn't that right?
Oh, yeah.
But Reiner has made a lot of really good games, and so it's very hard to split hairs, but that's what we're doing here. So there's also S tier, which is basically the best. These are the best Reiner Knizia games. Not the best of the best, but they're the best for sure.
Oh, yeah.
A tier actually stands for three things: amazing, absolutely, and always. Okay, so
oh yeah.
Yeah. Four things in reality. So A tier is still a very, very strong list. Then we have B tier, which these are just your super solid hidden gems, surprisingly great games. So we're finally getting into games that aren't amazing, but they are great. Down at B tier. So, and after that, we have the C tier. This is what we call reliable Reiner. These are good games, okay? I know sometimes when you get a C in school, you're like, that is not a good grade. Or when a game gets a 7 out of 10, you're like, that's not even worth my time. But you know what? These are good games, and we do think they're worth playing. And often, in most cases, especially for, Knizia files like us, we would rather play these games than much of the industry hotness. So to put things in context. And so we do think these are worth a try, at the very least, for Knizia fans.
Yeah.
Are you pretty much in agreement on that?
No, I absolutely agree. I think what I found when I was making my personal tier list before this, just to make sure that my opinions were settled, so that I felt like I had something to fight for. A lot of the games I found in C tier were ones that I thought were good, but just maybe weren't quite for me, or if someone said, oh, this is one of my favorite Knizia games, this is a top 10 for me, I wouldn't bat an eye. I'd be like, man, I agree. I accept that. I can't really argue against that. It's just, I don't feel the same way. So like C for me is like, there's a lot of potential there for someone to really, really like what's going on with
definitely
those designs.
Awesome. Yeah. C tier is solid gaming, and I'd be happy to play pretty much any of those C tier games. So, now D tier stands for decent. These are what we think are subpar for Knizia, although some would say he's designed 700 games and you've only tried 150 or so of them. So maybe subpar is a little bit lower than what we've experienced. But for us, these are subpar from what we've experienced, us seeking out the best Knizia games. And so we think these games are fine. I mean, we'll play them if you insist, but we're not really hungry to play them. So it's even lower than C tier, obviously. And then finally, there's the F tier. So F tier is just that tier down there where it's like, nah, I'm good. I don't really want to play that ever again. So this one is, I will admit, it's a little bit smaller than the rest of my, lists of games on the other tiers. But these are definitely a step lower than D tier or C tier, those kind of things.
Oh, yeah. And, it's the games that we played, 160 between the two of us. It's very self-selecting. We're not going to seek out the games that we think look broken. Every game that I tried, at least, I thought was going to be at least decent, and some of them disappointed me more than others. Like for me, the F tier is more the E tier, where it's like none of them are, they still work as games. I don't think I saw it. I mean, Reiner Knizia has a Roll Move Cars tie-in game that looks absolutely terrible, and that's like Cars, the Pixar. Yeah. That's
IP. Oh wow.
it's like true F material, but I'm not going to seek that out to try it. But we
Mm,
also have to put
yeah.
something at the bottom of the list, you know? So
Yeah. Well, I will say one of those F tier games, it like I felt like our group broke it, and and that's partially what put it on the F tier.
oh,
Is that there should really be another rule where we can't break it like we did. So we'll get into that later.
yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Looking forward to it. So
All right. Well, without further ado, let's jump into it with a game that I have never played.
we're starting off strong with
Hey.
Africa. Africa for me is like the quintessential B-side Knizia. There's so many interesting ideas in it. When I first started playing it with a group of friends that I played a lot of these games with, they're very, very long. I can't think of the word. They're very patient with me asking them to play 5 new Knizias every week. But when we first started getting into it and exploring the map, flipping over tokens, no one was really understanding exactly the ramifications of things. But about halfway through the game, something clicked. And suddenly we were all engaged, leaning forward, realizing that these simple rules had ramifications going down the lines, and leading to the end of the game that was really exciting, really solid. And it was just a good experience overall. Something that I would be happy to own if, one, the theme was a bit more, I guess, 2023. It's really unfortunate that the only depiction of the indigenous people of Africa is that of nomads, when like comradeship and family and like tribes are so important to the unity of different peoples throughout the entire continent. And then the production was also just, the box was huge, the pieces were not great. The minis actually leak their color, and you have to store them separately so they don't stain all the other components.
Yikes.
But at its core, it's a game that makes me mad with how good it actually is.
All right. Well, I obviously haven't tried this, and you have introduced me to some very, very good hidden gem Knizia games, or at least put them on my radar for me to try them. But I do feel skeptical about Africa a little bit, just because, I mean, just looking at the ratings online, especially the geek buddies that I follow, who tend to really, like a lot of Knizia designs, they don't speak super highly of this game. Most of them say it's okay. So my question to you is, do you feel, and I have a lot of really good B tiers that I'm going to be whipping out today. So do you feel like this is solidly a B tier, or do you feel like it's more a high C tier?
I think you could make a case for it either way. I think it's generally like a low to mid B tier for me. But
okay.
there was like a sauce to it. There's a sauce that was just like, oh, everything I do in this and every action I take now feels weighty in a way that's really, really satisfying. So
all right, okay, I'm gonna trust you on this, but if I end up trying this game later and it's worse than my C tier games, I'm gonna be ticked.
You know what, I'm okay with putting it like at the height of C tier.
Okay. The height of C tier. Okay, we need an in between. We need a B C tier.
A B minus, C plus.
B
we can just add 15 more tiers here. Honestly, we would be able to make a case for it, but
yeah,
time is short.
Okay.
We should probably move on. It's the next
onward to Age of War. Have you played this one?
I own this, and I've gifted multiple copies.
Okay. Oh, you've gifted them. Why do you hate these people?
Not
to reveal my secrets, but for me, this is my first. We're starting with first a game I haven't played, and then second, my first F tier game actually is Age of War. F tier. Yeah. I really didn't like this game. And let me make my case here, and then I'd like to hear your case too, because
Okay.
I know that this is a game that will already ruffle a lot of feathers, because I think a lot of people really like this, and this is probably some people's favorite Knizia dice game or push your luck game. But I think there's way better in those two categories of other titles. But Age of War, my problem with this game is it is just so punishing in every conceivable way. Like you roll the dice and then you choose where to commit them, either to the center where you're competing over these castles, or you commit them to another player's castle, somebody who's already claimed the castle you're trying to steal it from them, right? And from there, you just keep rolling the dice and watching all of your hopes and dreams slowly but surely die off into oblivion. And that is my experience with Age of War. It's like you work so hard to get, these castles, and then when you finally do get one, it's like somebody else comes in and they have the luckiest roll ever and they steal it away from you instantly. I had the worst experience with this game. I just think it's too punishing, and there are a lot of other games who do that, like stealing from other people and dramatic rolls and pushing your luck to do something that's harder or that seems impossible and then pulling it off. I just think other games do it better, and then the highs are still just as high, but the lows aren't nearly as low as what I experienced in Age of War. So F tier for me.
For me, Age of War is a high D tier, because I see all the problems that you have with it, and I agree for the most part. On your turn, you basically make one decision and then hope and pray that things work out.
Yeah.
But the simplicity of that means that it's very easy to teach to people. And it's one that I tend to play games with people who don't play games a lot. And that happens frequently. And if I go to a game night and I bring games that I think are better, they might not get played because people aren't willing to sit through even 5 minutes of rules. But Age of War has 2 minutes of rules, and then people get going. And so for me, it has a place in my collection as I'm going to bring this to a game night because I know half a dozen people who would be able to teach it and have a good time with it, and play it over there. And I don't have to play it. But they genuinely have a great time with it, and
that's true.
I had a great time. My mom likes this game, and for me, that's always like that bumps it up at least like a solid point in grading, just because it's easy, it's fast. I've had some great dramatic moments of like, oh, I can't believe you actually made that, or haha, try and throw yourself against the 2-arrow 2-horse castle for the 15th time. You'll never get it. I think it's decently fun, but it's worn out for me.
Yeah, I can live with D tier just because, as you say, there are people who enjoy it. But for me, I can think of like 5 dice games from Reiner Knizia alone that I think solve a lot of the issues of Age of War and still cater to the casual non-gaming audience and still have just as many dramatic and fun and exciting moments. So yeah, we'll leave it there. D tier.
All right. Amun-Re, the card game. We could just take turns.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
When it comes to our initial impressions and the initial placement. For me, Amun-Re, the card game, is my first F tier.
Oh, wow.
It just did not impress me or my 2 Knizia loving buddies that I played it with. Maybe it's because we only played it with 3. It's probably better with 4 or 5, but and it's so hard to judge versions of games on their own merits, because
definitely
there's interesting things that Amun-Re does with the Amun-Re card game does with the Amun-Re formula, but it strips away a lot of what I think makes the game interesting. The fact that the only thing you can buy in between rounds is pyramids, and just the way that stacking cards and stuff like that, it just didn't hit for us, and it just made me want to play basically any other Reiner Knizia.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so this is one that I played this year at Dice Tower West with two other Knizia files. So it was a 3-player game, and for me, it was a C tier experience.
Ooh.
Um, yeah, and I think I can see why you might be disappointed with this game if you want kind of the more epic scale and the two-phase, especially the two-phase, experience of Amun Ra in or Amun Ray. And I don't know, to me, I find that its merits come in. It's definitely a faster game than Amun Ray.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then the thing that was really interesting to me about it, probably my favorite part of the game, was deciding which cards you want to use for each auction. Like you have a money track that determines how much money you can invest in the next round of auctions, but then you decide how much of that to spend on your very specific money cards. Like, okay, I'm gonna put my 8 and my 2 and my 1 and my 3 into this next round of auctions, and everybody sees that, and then the next player looks at that and goes, okay, well, if I go 4, 5, 6, 7 or something like that, then I'm gonna beat essentially 3 out of your 4 cards. And to me, that was the most interesting part of the game is kind of deciding what's going to be your bidding power and seeing what other people commit to and then trying to outwit them. So for me, it's a C tier, but if you feel like it's real low on your list, maybe we settle for D tier. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I'm totally fine with it being C tier, actually.
Mhm.
And that's because of thoughts that I have on the next game,
which is probably higher for both of us.
Yeah,
so let's jump into it.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like Amun Ray the card game has potential that I'd be willing to give it another shot. So anyways, Amun Ray, the
Amun Ray, and we're looking at 20th anniversary edition specifically because that's the one that is most accessible to folks. So for me, this one is B tier. Which is probably lower than what a lot of other people would rank it at. I think Amun Ray, for a lot of people, is their favorite Reiner Knizia game, and for good reason. Amun Ray is a very epic, probably one of his most complex Euro-style games, but it also features some really juicy auctions, a really cool two-phase structure. I mean, I can't say it better than what Shut Up and Sit Down just said about it. On their recent video interview about how this is just still a game that's even 20 years later is still excellent in a lot of ways and even improved upon with the new modules that help with, especially with the lower player counts, the officials variant. So this is one that, for me, I love playing it, but my main hold with it not being higher is the fact that it's so long. Every time I played this game, it just eats up the entire game night. And which in some ways that's might be what you're looking for, but for me, I find that a lot of Knizia games that are this thinky and this strategic and this meaty are often much faster than Amun Ray, the board game. And so that's why for me it's one that I really, really like to play. I think it's a great game, but it's not among my upmost tiered games.
Yeah. I actually have it at the exact same spot. For me, it's like very top of the B tier, but for everything that you've said, basically, it keeps it from being able to cross over the threshold into something that I want to bring into heavy rotation. It's long. It's kind of a bear to set up.
And teach. Yeah.
And teach. I think
all the phases.
I've played 3 5-player games, a 2-player game, and a 3-player game. And only one of the 5-player games seemed to really click. The other 2 just dragged so much more. It's a game that I feel if you get people who've played it 3 or 4 times already and are really keyed in on keeping it moving, you have to have people who are ready and willing to commit to focusing on basically nothing but the game. Otherwise, it's going to take the entire night.
Yeah, I think it's just because there's so many phases that you have to progress through and so many rounds of phases to progress through that it really slows the game down quite a bit in ways that I think hurt it when compared to other games of this weight and complexity. So, all right. Next one.
Aristocracy. Aristocracy for me is going to be a C tier. There is an interesting game in there, and flipping over things and trying to get the bubble, blow the bubble big enough for you to feel good about it before someone else is like, oh, actually, I'm going to take that and take your hard work. There's set collection, route building. I think the biggest bugbear is the production. Setting out all of the tokens is a little annoying, but they're all color coded, shape coded, very nicely thick in a way that feels strange to feel, but very nice. And because of how like well organized they are, everybody can help with setup, and so I don't think it's that big of a deal. But it's fine. It's good. It's enjoyable.
I'm in full agreement with you here. C tier game, definitely fine. There's definitely an interesting game in there and one that I'm happy to revisit. But I think my biggest hang up is there is what feels like a lot less control or more luck to the experience than what you might expect going in. And yeah, it has this weird, like very ugly charm to it in a lot of ways. But it doesn't feel, I'll say this, it doesn't feel like Blue Lagoon, but it checks a lot of the same boxes as Blue Lagoon in the sense that like there's set collection and you're kind of building routes and you're trying to score points in various ways. And for me, this one doesn't give me nearly as much control or satisfaction as Blue Lagoon does. And so, yeah, it's one I'm happy to play, but not higher than C tier for me.
Solid.
Okay. Art Robbery up next. So for me, this is a B tier Reiner Knizia card game. So I think a lot of people are familiar with, or they've at least heard of the game Cover Your Assets. This is one that's especially very popular, I think, in our region of the world because the publisher, I think, is based in Utah or Idaho or something like that.
He's in Utah, somewhere in Salt Lake, I think. Or Drake.
Yeah, and so, you and I are both from Utah, and so they have like established a huge presence, at least over here, but I think even further beyond the West here where we're at. But Cover Your Assets is popular with non-gamers and the like, where you're just kind of stealing all these piles from each other. And now that I've played, hundreds more games, I think it's a pretty bad game, honestly. It's one that entertains folks, but to me, Art Robbery is like, what if Cover Your Assets was actually fun and clever?
And fast.
and fast. Yeah, exactly. Art Robbery is it's a hoot. Every time I've broken this out, I've had a great time with folks. You have a hand of cards, and then there's these chips in the middle, and you play through 4 rounds of different chips, and you're trying to steal stuff from the middle. But once it's gone from the middle, and you play that matching card, then you steal it from another player, and you keep doing that until I think all the chips from the middle are stolen. And then there's a guard dog that you can put in front of you to protect your chips from being stolen. And I just think it's fun. It's casual. It's not super deep. It's not going to knock anyone's socks off. But if you want to play something that'll bring out some laughs and some really good interaction, then I think Art Robbery is a great pick.
Yeah. I think for me, I had it ranked a little lower than that. I think it was C tier. But I do very much appreciate, 1, how quick it is to teach, 2, how quick it is to set up, 3, how small the box is, and 4, how big the cards are. They're like slightly bigger than normal, and they have this wonderful finish to them. The production is very nice. This is one that I think I'm going to give to my mom for her 6th grade class, because I think 6th graders would just die over this game.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you're right that a lot of times the production and those decisions, like the box isn't too big and things like that, can really give me personally a much kinder perspective to the game. When it's like, this thing isn't really taking up much of my life, but when I do break it out, it's fun. And if it were a huge box or a burden or things like that, then yeah, I'd be ranking it lower, because it's like, what are you giving me for all this that you're taking from me? Oh, yeah. which other games on this list will be punished for that for sure. So are you can you live with B tier, or do you feel like it's got to be?
I can live with like low B tier.
Yeah, I can. Yep, works for me.
Because Axio, I think, is very much mid B tier.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a game that it's very clever. I love the pyramids. If you make one of the things that kind of drove me crazy about Ingenious was those spots where there's one space empty, and it was just like, oh. And obviously it drove Reiner crazy a little bit too, because he came back with Axio and he's like, we're going to do something about that, and it's going to be spicy. And I very much enjoy just the simple play of it. I think dominoes are great. I think dominoes are fun. Axio's a game I would love to play more often. It's a game I would love to have like at my parents' house or grandparents' house, something like that. I just think it's solid.
I completely agree. I'm with you on all accounts. And I think it's interesting. I've observed in our Reiner Knizia Discord community, which, by the way, we'll put a link to the Reiner Knizia Enthusiast Discord community in the description of this video. For those of you who want to join, if you're here, you should obviously be part of our community. It's a good time. And it's interesting to me that a lot of people who have played both of these games, at least in that community, seem to prefer Axio over Ingenious. And I imagine part of it is because of those pyramids. When you enclose a single space, that player gets to plop down a pyramid and score every color adjacent, which is really cool. And there are ploys you can make where you can divide up a space in a certain way where you drop down multiple pyramids, and it's so satisfying to pull those maneuvers off. So very good family weights abstract strategy game, great tile placement game. So
okay, that's the last of the A's, and we are coming.
All right. B for Babylonia, but this is not a B tier game. This is my first gold tier game. Babylonia, baby. Yes. This is an interesting one because I think for a lot of the gold tier games that I have on my list, I knew that they were gold tier even before I was, coming up with this tier thing in my head. I invented tier lists, by the way. No, that's not what I mean. But no, so this is a game. The first time I played it, I was like, this is a good game. And then I played it again, and then I was like, this is a great game. And then I played it some more, and then at that point, it was like, this is one of my favorite Knizia games. So it's grown on me over time. And it's a modern tile placement Reiner Knizia game with some modern touches to it in a lot of ways, where there are more points springing around, going all over the place. You're very much looking for ways to cut off your opponent's scoring potential while maximizing your own. And I think what makes this game so satisfying for me is, those wood discs are just really fun to draw and put on your rack and put outs. But it's really the variety of strategies that you can pursue and the ripple effects that come from the early decisions and how those pay off later in the game, with a very, very quick play time, and it's a game that's satisfying from 2 all the way to 4. It's full player count. For me, this is one of Reiner's best tile placement games, and a clear example that he's definitely still got it, because this one I think released in 2019. So Babylonia is my first gold tier title.
Babylonia, I like a lot. I think for me, one of the greatest strengths that it has is the scaling. It works incredibly at 2, 3, and 4. And it gives a similar feel with differing strategies at each player count. For me, Babylonia is a very high S tier because I can see if you're playing with someone else, or if you're playing with people who are not as good at mental math, then it can definitely feel more taxing for them in ways that other tile placement games are not. And I think for me, I enjoy the adding because I do that like neurotically. I just do like time tables in my head as like mental fidgeting or whatever. And for me,
that's how you go to sleep at night. It's like counting sheep.
13, 26, 39, 52, just 19 times tables. For me, I think the counting is fun because it's like you count it up. And if you're doing it out loud, if someone places a tile and then starts counting and they get past 20, I'm like, holy, what? Are you kidding me? And then they go 28,
I agree, yeah.
And then they move their tile all the way, and you're like, holy cow, that was crazy.
Yeah, and then you're like, why did we let this happen?
Yeah. And I think it's really fun, but I also understand that it's not quite, I don't know. I can see why people have problems with it. And I think
yeah.
it does hold it back just slightly. I think depending on where we get with things later, I would be okay with Babylonia slipping into gold tier. But I think for me right now, it's like the quintessential S. Like it's so good. But there's like just
I think you make a good case for why it may not work for everybody, and it's like you say, it's that constant scoring, and sometimes it's just really crazy amounts of scoring that you're doing, and it's throughout the game. It's almost every turn, pretty much that you're scoring some points, at least when a city is surrounded or that kind of thing, and so. I can see where you're coming from. I'll let it slide down to S tier. I mean, S tier is still pretty dang good. So,
and it's like, you know, Decision Space, great podcast, made an hour and a half episode about why it's so good.
That is a good episode.
There is so much good to Babylon. So I can be convinced later, but
all right.
Let's go ahead and take the real gold tier. And I'm going to scroll down here. I'm going to grab Shot and Totten because I think Shot and Totten is just slightly better battle line.
Okay. Should we get Shot and Totten 2 while we're at it, or do we want to focus on these first?
We can come to Shot and Totten 2 when we come to it. I don't think it... it's not quite going to be at the same level for me. But Shot and Totten for me is the quintessential Knizia. It is like shaved down to an absolute razor's edge of design. You have a deck of cards of values 1 through 9, 1 through 10 if you're playing Battle Line. And you're building 3 card formations on 9 different stones. And you're trying to build mini poker hands that are stronger than what your opponent builds. But you're only playing 1 card at a time and then drawing a card. And so you have a hand of cards. You have a small picture of what cards are not available to your opponent, what cards are still in the deck. And as you go, trying to bluff your way through formations that you don't quite have the cards for yet, and drawing through the deck and trying to, you know, push your strongest formations where they'll make the most impact, trying to draw out your opponents, to commit resources to an area that you don't really care about. I just think it's phenomenal. Every time I play this game, more depth is revealed to me. And every time I play this game with someone new, we both have that moment where it's like, oh my gosh, this game is so good. This game is already blowing my mind. And we just have a deck of cards and that's it. I think it's just an absolutely phenomenal design and how simple and tight it is.
Shot and Totten is great. I don't know if I caught this, but you said you prefer Shot and Totten slightly to Battle Line. What was the reason for that?
I think it's just very slightly tighter. I think.
Is there a difference in card numbers and that kind of thing?
As far as I know, the only difference is Shot and Totten is the suits go 1 through 9, and Battle Line they go 1 through 10. And then obviously Battle Line introduced the tactics cards, which I've never actually played with. And you know, people that I follow on BGG who say, yeah, I've got thousands of plays in this, haven't touched the tactics cards. They're not necessary. But newer versions of Shot and Totten have the tactics cards in them as well. Yeah. So, but I think it's slightly tighter, and I think that just works in favor of how simple and tight the design is.
I didn't know that about the difference in the number range, but Shot and Totten is great. This is actually one that when I had a meeting with Reiner, this was a while ago. It might have been like 2 years ago now, but it was like at the end of a discussion, I was like, by the way, have you ever thought about making a Shot and Totten board game? And I was actually trying to design one myself and I couldn't crack it. And so I was like, well, I should just try to convince Reiner to do it, you know? And one that kind of uses that poker hand dueling concept, but in like a larger auctioning style experience. To me, that would be really interesting. But anyway, this is a really good, an excellent 2-player game. One that I think one of many that proves that Reiner is very, very good at designing 2-player games. For me, though, this is one that I had ranked as A tier. But I think that's more, I know here comes the booze. So I think that's more akin just to my experience with the game up to this point than it is a knock on the game itself, because I think I've mostly played it with my wife and I, and we tend to she likes to really think about her decisions in a game, and oftentimes it pays off. She comes out on top. But this is one that I think goes slower than it should when I'm playing it between her and I. And if it went faster, then I'd be like, this game is just firing on all cylinders. But I think that's what knocks it down a couple tiers for me, is just that my experience playing it many times. We have Battle Line Medieval, which is a quite a pretty version of the game. All the box is too big,
it is, for sure.
And but besides the box being too big, it's very nice. And yeah, it's gone. It seems like every time we play it, it goes a little bit longer than I'd like it to. But that's just because of us being more like heavily analysis type players, where we don't want to give our opponent even the slightest opening when it comes to, you're going up against these battle lines, and so that tends to make it draw out a little bit longer for us. But I could settle for S tier on this one, or I mean, I'm willing to move it higher than what I ranked it at, because I think it is one of his best designs, and one that's worth playing for anybody.
Okay. So. All right. Well, we'll see if later down the road, Schottentotten and Babylonia both slip into gold tier. If
that sounds like a threat. Oh man! Right. All right, Beowulf the Legend. Okay, so Beowulf the Legend is an interesting one. It's quite a polarizing game. You go on to Board Game Geek and you look through the comments, and you see people that love it and you see people that hate it. And for me, I'm definitely on the love it side. I put it in the A tier personally. And it's because this one has a very unique experience that's I guess I've seen it in a couple other Knizia games now, but one that I haven't seen anywhere else as far as the entire experience goes. Beowulf the Legend, you are going through this whirly, swirly trail of events as the apprentices to Beowulf himself, and you're trying to one-up each other and kind of show off the most, and eventually become his successor as he goes on his adventures. Reiner, I imagine he read through the whole poem, and then he designed this game based on all the major events of Beowulf's life. And the reason it's polarizing, though, I think there's a few reasons, honestly. One of them is that when you have Beowulf and that John Howe art on the front, people come in expecting like a mirror trash, violence, battling type game, and that's not what it is at all. It's a lot more subtle than that, where people accuse it of not being thematic, but I disagree there.
I disagree so hard. Like, as an English, recovering English major, Beowulf, the board game, is the most Beowulf board game that's ever been created, and probably will.
And why do you say that?
I mean, it follows the events of the poem, but I think structure wise, because one of the big themes, and I'm going to get English major on you, big themes of the poem of Beowulf is that of fighting against weird, against fate, and knowing where you're going to end up, but struggling within like the space that you're allotted anyway, trying to find meaning, trying to find glory in the life that you have, even if you know that it's going to end in a certain way. And the very strict structure of the 3-panel board actually really lends itself well to like the theme of struggling within unchanging destiny, which is really cool, if maybe not intentional.
Yeah, and I think that's very poetic of you to put it that way. I think that's a really cool insight. But for me, the theme comes out in just trying to one up each other, the apprentices, and then sometimes you just totally bungle it and end up with a wound, and it's like, why would you try that, you doofus? Because that's the other most polarizing part of this game, is the risk mechanism, where you're going up in these big auctions against each other, and you go round and round in the main auctions trying to match the highest person's bid, and until everybody passes out of the round. And then when you pass out of the round, you take a drafting token, which is basically like, this is the order in which I get to draft a goodie or a bad thing from this event wheel. And so whoever wins gets first dibs on all the possible rewards to choose from, right? But then on top of that, and not only are you managing your cards, you're looking down the line to see, okay, this event is coming up. I should save my cards for this because I care about these rewards more than what I care about in this current event, right? And to me, that's really cool. There's a long-term strategy of planning out what's coming up. How do I want to manage my hand now? It's a game of chicken where you want to invest hard here, but then maybe just back out immediately there. And so you can win some auctions and not just waste your cards away and all of them, right? But there's on top of that, there's a risk mechanism where every time you have a turn to up your bid, you can reveal 2 cards from the deck. And if one or both of them match, then you add them to your bid. And if neither of them match, then you have to pass out of the auction. You take the worst token, and you also take a scratch, which those can add up to be really bad things down the road. So it's like this long form push your luck auctioning game, but the fact that it's like often 90 minutes with a lot of luck involved with these risks can really rub some people the wrong way. Oh, yeah. And that's why it's a love it or hate it kind of game. Now, the people who love it will argue that it's not just pure luck and whoever takes the most risks wins, because you got to know when you should take risks and when you shouldn't. Because if you take a risk when you really shouldn't and you end up getting burned for it, then yeah, that's going to hurt you long term. Whereas if you're like, you know what, it's not a huge problem if I fail this risk right now, but if I succeed in it, then it's going to help me a lot. Then that's the time you should take the risks, right? But it's a polarizing game. It's not going to be for everybody. But for me, it's really unique, really fun, maybe a little bit longer than it should be, and maybe slightly more luck swingy than it should be. But there's no other experience like it. And that's why it's an A-tier Knizia game for me.
I can accept that. I only got to play this one time before I let it away because it was hard for me to find people who would be willing to let me talk about Beowulf. I appreciate the thematic relevance of the mechanics, but I'm willing to keep it there. So
okay, excellent.
All right, Blue Lagoon. B for Blue Lagoon.
Oh.
I think it's
all
good.
Right, okay.
I think for me, it boils down to one very simple thing. On your turn, you place 1 token at a time to build chains between islands, connect them for points, pick up different trade goods for points, do all sorts of other things, connecting groups for points. There's a lot of different ways to score points. Some of them are less intuitive, some of them are more intuitive. But for me, it's really the pace of it. I don't like just placing one thing at a time. It feels too restrictive for me. And it's just kind of like personal preference. I understand that it's good, but it just feels too restrictive.
So this one's hard for me to say it's very similar to Through the Desert in a lot of ways, right? And we'll get to that eventually. It's pretty far down on the alphabet. But for me, it's hard for me to say one is clearly better than the other. And I think a lot of people will be in that camp of putting one above the other. But I love both of these games, and I had it personally in the S tier, but I'm going to make a case for why it should be in the A tier. Okay. This game is small and it's dirt cheap as far as Reiner Knizia tile placements go.
That's very true.
And the other thing that really makes it unique is the 2-tier, just like Amun-Re, the board game. There's 2 phases to the game, and in the first phase, you, as part of putting out your tiles, you also put out huts. And those huts determine where you can spread out from in the second phase. And the rules kind of change as far as where you can spread out from, essentially. And to me, that's a really fun change up. Also, the fact that you score mid-game, that can bother some people, but that puts a target on the leader's back in ways that makes it quite fun in the second round, where you can definitely block each other in this game, just like Through the Desert. And it still scratches that most important itch for me of I love putting people into moral dilemmas. They're not really moral, but that's how it feels, you know? It's like the Green Goblin dropping the 2 things and telling Spidey to choose between the 2. That's how I feel when I play this game against other people, because the moment I see that, one of my opponents is getting aggressive against, say, my wife who's also playing, that's the moment I get aggressive against her at the same time. And now she only has one tile placement to decide between whether to deny him what he's going for or to deny me what I'm going for. And
I'm guessing she probably
I
uses
love
the latter more often.
Yeah.
You know, if you're gonna make it personal, it means at least make it really personal.
So to me, this is a fantastic tile placement game, fairly approachable. There are several different ways to score, but pretty easy to teach. I haven't had any issues as far as that goes. So I'd say we settle on 8 with this one.
Yeah, I think for me, like, I mean, it's a matter of like relative. Like I think Amun-Re is just better than it. I think Amun-Re has a lot of more interesting abilities. Even if Amun-Re as like a total package feels like incomplete. So I think that's one of the biggest, like Amun-Re is kind of like the gatekeeper of B tier for me in a lot of ways.
I don't know. I feel like Blue Lagoon's much easier to recommend to way more folks as like, hey, you want a good Knizia tile placement game? Like, yeah, this one's easy to pick up.
That's a respectable metric. So I'm okay with it there.
We'll settle there for now. Next up on the list is Blue Moon City. Now, this is where I suppose I disagree heavily with where the Dice Tower ranked it, and that's fine. I mean, I think this game has some really big fans, and that's great for this game. But for me, it's a D tier game. Ooh. It's decent. It is like the epitome of decent. And I was trying to remember, you know, I played it for the first time a few years ago. And when I played it, I was already excited about Reiner Knizia, and I was like, sweet, another one. And then I played it and I was like, well, it's pretty good. And eventually, I think after hearing other people rave about it, I'm like, I need to pick up this game and try it again. And years later, I picked it up and I tried it again, and I was like fully, you know, deep into the Knizia, you know, well at that point. And it's still exact same experience of like, it's decent, you know. And I think the big thing that holds it back for me personally is that it's very, very much a tactical efficiency game. And you're just trying to be slightly more efficient with your tactics of kind of moving around the board and kind of contributing to these different tiles. And there's some interesting shared incentive stuff going on there of when a tile completes, you know, there are multiple players who benefit from it. But for me, it's not very exciting. There's not much drama there. It's just like, who's going to be slightly more efficient than somebody else? And then at the end of it, somebody wins by like one turn. But it never really felt like, oh, they earned it for sure because of what they did here. It's just like, okay, you were just, you know, 0.2% more efficient than me, so you won the game and we're done. So that's why it's D tier for me.
I can see that. I think for me, I think it does some interesting things, and I very much enjoy tactical efficiency puzzles. Like Tosh Kalar is my favorite game of all time. Nice. Cosmic Encounter. So put a target on my back for that. So for that, I think I really enjoyed it, but I've also only played it one time. But it's something that has kind of been in the back of my mind that I want to give it another go and kind of just simmer with it for a bit, because I think there's a lot of subtle things in the way that the game is structured that I think would come out more if you played it. And I'd be very interested to try it too, because a lot of people are like, oh, this game is the best at 2. I'm like, I've got so many other Reiner Knizias that are the best at 2.
Yeah.
It's hard to find space for that, but
that's interesting because I think I felt like the shared incentive part of it, which you don't really get that in a 2-player game. The shared incentive part is quite interesting of like, who do I help and when do I complete something and who's going to help me? And so, but I mean, if you, I could live with it being in C tier because like Dice Tower, this is one of their highest ranked Knizia games across the board.
One that I'm like, okay, I can see why you would rank that so high. So yeah, I just wanted to be higher than Amun-Re, the card game. That's basically it. So
we'll put a high C above the lower C Amun-Re, the card game. How about that?
Okay, beautiful. All right, staying in the Blue Moon Legends for me. That's S tier or very, very high A tier.
Okay.
It's a very strange and subtle game. You've got bespoke decks that are battling against each other in kind of strange auctions, where all you're trying to do is you're trying to match or exceed the strength of whatever card or like 1 to 3 cards your opponent played in their last turn. But the way that the decks are constructed, each have their own very distinct feel, even though the mechanics of the game are super simple. And every time I play this, it just blows my mind, just a little bit. But that being said, it's I think it's S for subtle, because there is a lot to dig into this game, but it's also something that if you don't have the time or the partner or like the willpower to sit with it and to play it half a dozen times without really understanding what's going on, then I don't think it's going to open up to you in a way that I feel like it does and is very rewarding to do. But I think Blue Moon is a very, very fascinating game.
Yeah, I think you're spot on in the sense that it's not for everyone, right? It's I think the artwork can rub a lot of people the wrong way.
I've got opinions on the artwork.
Yeah, I know you have a beef with that. And also it's like a dueling card game, but one that's more streamlined than your collectible card games or your trading card games, but with a lot of Reiner Knizia streamlining and sharpness to it. And so I've played this at least 2 times now, and I think it's a very solid game. I know a lot of people, this is like one of their all-time favorite 2-player games from any designer, and so it has a very strong fan base as well. For me, it's a B-tier game though, because I don't think it's for everyone, and it's definitely not for my wife. And that's my main 2-player go-to person. And so I don't know, I could settle for this personally being an A tier if kind of split the difference there.
I think that's where it is for me, because it's also something that I feel the potential there every time that I play it. And if I had someone to just dig into it, I think I'd become one of those like Kyoshi Island foaming at the mouth guys. Like,
yeah. Yeah, I think you'll get the most out of this game if you understand the decks really well. But for games like this, like I don't have that kind of partner to really dive into it and get the most out of it. Yeah. And so you need that kind of setup to really appreciate it, I think.
Absolutely do. It just doesn't work unless both of you know the decks that you're playing against.
Cool. Next one here we have Botswana, which I can't even find on my list here. Oh, I think it's because I also called it Wildlife Safari.
Oh yeah.
It's known by multiple names. Yeah, Wildlife Safari, also known as Botswana. This game is so clean, but it seems to be growing on me with each play. And the new edition, I will say, from I think a Japanese publisher, is so good.
It's so cute.
I have it like a high B tier, which means you could talk me into putting it higher. Because Botswana is a game where all you do is you take a token, one of these possible animals, and then you play a card, and these cards match the tokens, but you can play any card you want. It can be different from the token. And these values go from 0 to 5. And basically, once enough cards have been played into one animal type, the game immediately ends, or the round immediately ends. And then whatever was the last card played for each animal is the value of the tokens that players have been taking in front of them. And so it's such a clean game. It's so delightful. And I feel like it gets better with more plays.
Oh, yeah. I think this is great at 4. I think it's amazing at 4. I think it's great at 5. I think it's pretty good at 3.
Okay.
Because with 4 players, you leave a couple cards out, so you don't know exactly what's going on. And I really like the mystery of that. With 3 players, you leave a few more out. With 5 players, you've got the whole deck in there, and it's more a matter of pacing rather than, is this animal even going to be able to be finished? I've got the Polish version of this, Riki Friki. I would replace it with this Japanese version in a heartbeat.
So good.
It's adorable. You like little wooden meeples instead of just little cardboard tokens. I think it's great. So simple, so fast, so great.
Oh, is this an A tier Knizia game?
Oh. I have
it's pretty dang good.
I have a strong proclivity for simplicity. Like simplicity is a huge thing for me because I teach games to people a lot, and it has 3 rules, and it's incredible. So
Honestly, I think I owned Africa or Wildlife Safari from Eagle Griffin Games before. That was my first experience playing it, right? But then when I picked up this edition, it like, I don't know, it wants you to fall in love with it. It invites you to fall in love with the game. Really, I think it's the perfect production, this new Japanese version. I think I got it from Amazon Japan, maybe. It goes in and out of availability on Amazon Japan, but I was lucky to get it. It cost me way more than it should have. So yeah, careful there.
I mean, likewise, but like international versions, but
it's so good.
It's worth it. So
yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Man, we've still got so many games. Probably need to put pace just a little bit. But this one is something that, for me, Cascadero, the upcoming tile laying game from Bitewing Games, is very high A tier. And I think that's only because I haven't played it as much as I want to. I love the combos that you can create with this game because it shares the same central pacing of Blue Lagoon, where you're placing one piece at a time. But the times that you're able to line things up with scoring the book, that you're able to do more with that one piece, really elevates it in a way above that I enjoy a lot. I really, really enjoy the tactical considerations and then the long-term strategic considerations of making big groups and connecting cities. And it's also just incredibly gorgeous. Look at the orange on that. Oh, it's beautiful.
Ian killed it. Yeah, so obvious bias here. I'm the publisher of Cascadero. So and that's honestly part of the reason we're doing this list right now, is because we currently have a Kickstarter going. Well, we should, if you're watching this, when we launch this video. We have a Kickstarter going for Cascadero and Cascadito. And Cascadero is the newest tile placement strategy game from Reiner Knizia, which I'm super excited about because that's one of my favorite genres in all of Knizia's collection in his entire profile of games. But for me, Cascadero, it started out, I was like, so in love with the gold tier when it started out, and I think I've settled on S tier. So sorry guys, sorry to disappoint everybody. It's only S tier for me. This is one that I've played probably over 20 times now, and it is so satisfying. Like you say, a lot of turns you take are just place out one thing, one envoy, and then that's your turn. But you can line up some really, really juicy combos, and I think I've encountered no other game that makes more satisfying combos and turns out of building up to something than Cascadero does. And there are 3 different ways to play, and I still haven't settled on which one is my favorite. I don't think I will, because I just like rotating through them. One of them you're chasing the heralds around. One of them you're just putting out. It's kind of the regular standard setup, and then on the other side, it's got a little bit of a Babylonia flavor to it with farmer tiles. But for me, this is it's cool to see Reiner take one of his biggest strengths, tile placement, and combine it with more modern trends such as tracks and combos, and do it in a really, really sharp way. So for me, it's an S tier Knizia through and through.
That's where I wanted to put it, but I didn't want to, just like stroke your ego too much. So totally.
Hey, I mean, I didn't make it. I got lucky, and they were like, "Hey,
you got good taste," like.
I just got lucky that we got to publish it, honestly. But I think it's so satisfying.
I'm so excited to have a physical copy of it. Okay, what about the little brother though?
The little brother, yeah. So this is one that I would rank personally as A tier Knizia, and there's a few reasons for that. Now, roll and writes. This is a roll and write game. Roll and writes are one of my more how do I put this? I'm pretty tired of roll and write genre in general at this point. I played a lot of Welcome to and Railroad Inc. and Ganshan Clever and stuff, and there are some really cool new twists on that with like Super Skill Pinball, and Reiner's done some really solid roll and writes up to this point as well. But the reason I've grown a little bit tired of this genre in a lot of ways is it tends to be less interactive, and they tend to not have legs like other games do. You play them a few times, and then eventually you're like, okay, I've seen what I've seen, and I'm ready to move on. But with Cascadito, I think It's one of Reiner's, obviously biased again. I'm publishing this too, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. I think it's one of his stronger spin-off games for sure. And the reason is he's able to maintain what makes Cascadero Cascadero, the interplay between the map and the combos and the tracks, but also take it in a different direction. And we pushed him to do this too. So the first map was fairly similar to the Cascadero experience, but in a smaller form. And we told him, like, we can't sell these together if they provide a relatively similar experience. People are just going to compare them to each other and be like, well, just get this one because it's better, right? So I told him, Reiner, you need to go buck wild with these sheets and do something really, really different and lean into what makes this game unique and special, the dice and the writing on the pads. And that's definitely what he did. There's 4 sheets that have entirely different tracks, maps, mechanisms, strategies, objectives, the works. And for me, I have a blast still. I've played this game a lot and I'm still not tired of it. And I think that's a good indicator to me. Okay, this is probably... I think it's a really strong roll and write game, even though it's not my absolute favorite genre. And I think it's his strongest roll and write next to one other game. And that's why it's an A-tier game for me.
Yeah, I think for me, I played through all the sheets solo a few times and had a really enjoyable time with it. And it's definitely got its own identity. It's got a lot going for it. For me, it was kind of like high B tier, but that's just kind of because I'm not super into roll and writes either. And this is something that every once in a while, I know I'm going to be like, I want to play Cascadito. I want to play Cascadito. But it's not something that I'm going to be champing at the bit like all the time. But it is something that I'm going to get, and I'm going to be very happy to have a copy of, and maybe look satisfyingly at the shelf more often than I pull it out. But something I'm always going to be happy to have.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. This is surprisingly one that, like, the solo modes are fun, but I almost think I prefer playing it multiplayer just because the dice drafting has a bit of that Azul flavor to it, where you can steal stuff away from people that they really want and kind of slow them down a little bit.
Oh yeah.
And then there's objectives that you're racing to complete too. And if you are able to nail an objective right before somebody else, or maybe they look like they're about to get it and you're far behind, but then you combo into stealing it away from them, those are really satisfying moments for me for this game. But I can live with it being on B tier because I'm obviously biased, but I think it's a really, really strong. If you're into roll and write games, or you want a roll and write game that has a little bit more teeth to it in the replayability, the variety, as well as the interaction, I think Cascadito is a very strong contender in those categories. So,
and when it comes to versions of games, I'm always a proponent for, sometimes I want the Cascadero taste, but I don't have the Cascadero time, and that's what Cascadito's there for. So,
oh yeah.
I think it's great. So
next,
all right, Catastrophe. I haven't played this, so you tell me where it goes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was waiting for you to introduce it. Yeah, we are back onto another F tier game for me. So, oh man, Catastrophe. It's I was trying to think back through my play of this. I've only played it one time, but I didn't want to play it again after that. My issue was it felt like luck in a lot of ways. Like, you kind of just luck into stuff that happens with you're drawing cards, you're trying to form sets. Honestly, it's very forgettable, but this is the thing that did stand out to me when I was thinking back on it. Like, why did this game not click for me? We were playing that same night. We played another Knizia card game, which I would say is like D or C tier. Okay, it's not a very strong Knizia card game, but in that game there was a lot of emotion and drama and laughter and fun, and it was like, okay, this is a fun experience. With Catastrophe, it's, even though it comes in looking like it's going to be a fun game, it was just like emotionless for all of us. And for me, it was like, for how little control you have over the experience of this game, and for how light it is, it's not providing me with any kind of drama or emotion that I want to see in games this light. And I never want to play this game again. And then at that point, the whole shtick of like, oh, look at these cats sticking their butts at you, like it just gets annoying. So F tier for me.
Beautiful. All right. Cat
Oh,
Blues.
another cat game.
Another cat game. Cat Blues for me is like solid B tier.
Hmm.
It's about making sets of 4 cards, but the cards that you have, you use to bid for lots of other cards to add to your hand, which is really, really unique. I think it's very, very interesting. It's very hard to find. And surprisingly hard to proxy. I had to buy 2 Skippo decks from a thrift store and mash together to get the range of cards that I needed for that.
Sure.
And then, when it comes to player count, length, rule set, it's a little bit of a mess when it comes to the actual design. But if you play it with 3 players, as the rulebook like tells you to, and you follow the rules all correctly, especially like when you draw a joker, everyone draws a card, so you're not super card starved. I think it's really sharp, a really really sharp card game.
Yeah, I think this game honestly didn't get a fair shake when it released, and that there's a few reasons for that. It says on the box it plays 2 to 6 players. I think that's an outright lie. And a lot of people apparently agree with me. This is not a game you should play at 5 or 6 players. And on top of that, it's one that if you don't emphasize certain strategies to the players when you introduce them to the game, they can shoot themselves in the foot very early, where they basically play out their hand to collect a few points, but then they don't have any cards left in their hand to auction for future rounds, and it takes a very long time for them to build their hand up again. So yeah, if you blow your hand early, then you can shoot yourself in the foot. So it's a game that can very easily make a poor first impression if you play with too many people, or you don't understand the what is a bad decision in this game in your first play, then you may never want to play it again. But for me, I was fortunate enough to play it at the optimal count. I think this is surprisingly a really excellent game at 2 and 3 players, and it's an auction game, which you don't see that very much, and it's great at 4 too. But this is one that even the auctions themselves, like you say, are interesting because you're building your hand. But I love how it's like you can either bid a number of cards, but they have to be different cards. You'd be like, I bid 3 cards, or you bid a specific card number where you say I bid 2 3s, and those kind of decisions are very interesting as the auction goes around. So for me, it's much more satisfying than a lot of your standard classic auction games. For me, this is an A tier Knizia card game, though. I think it's at 2 and 3 players, and even at 4, it's one of the best card gaming experiences you can get, as long as you come in with a good first impression.
Yeah.
And don't get scared off by having a bad play of it.
I think I'd be okay with putting it like high B, just because it's so hard to find.
Okay, yeah.
And I think just like the total package of it is just a little underwhelming, even though at its core, it is a very, very sharp card game. Love to see it.
Mm-hmm. It's so quick. It's like a 15-minute game. So I like to see that too in a game. So cool. Next game on the list, we have Charté. So Charté is a game that surprised me. I think this is one that you actually put on my radar, because initially it was like a 9-tile game. How good can it be? But then I think you played it and enjoyed it, and I played it and I was like, oh shoot, this is an A tier. This is an A tier Knizia game for me. Believe it or not, because it's basically a micro game. 9 tiles. You take turns either putting out a tile into a 3x3 grid, or you can rotate one of those tiles by 90 degrees. And you're building out this map where one player is trying to make a huge glob of land, and the other player is trying to connect together a huge glob of water. And it shocked me how much depth and freedom and ability for clever nuance there was to this game. I think it's there are a lot of board game publishers these days who make their living on like wallet games or micro games, and like, oh, look how much game you can get out of this little package. But I haven't seen any of those games pack as big of a punch as Charté does, and that's why it's not the most mind-blowing game ever. You can't come into this thinking like this is going to be so amazing, but I think if you give it a few plays and really appreciate what Reiner has crammed into the world's smallest box, then you'll find like, oh, this is a good game. So good.
Yeah, I don't think that anything better could be made with 9 tiles.
Exactly.
It's so good.
Yeah, he's maximized the potential of what you can do, and the strategy there is, I don't know, it's shocking. So,
okay, these next 2 I have not played. So where does Cheeky Monkey go?
Cheeky Monkey, that's a C tier game. This has a couple of different spin-offs to it, or very similar games, and that we'll talk about soon. I think Cheeky Monkey is the best because it's the most flexible. It can please the widest range. It's something I can play with my 4-year-old, and we both have a good time with. But it's also a filler game I can show to my gamer group that doesn't last too long, and you're just pushing your luck to try to steal tiles from each other. And if you have this version here that we have, then you're drawing the tiles from the monkey itself, the stuffed monkey. So I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. So I think it's a great C tier, well, a good C tier push your luck Knizia game. Next one, Circus Flocati. This is a B tier card game for me. I think it's really, really solid. This is another push your luck game. I think it isn't as good as Cat Blues or a lot of these other games, honestly, in B tier. So I would say it's probably lower B tier, just ranking against most of these other games. But it's very easy to teach, and the push your luck aspect is so satisfying. If you get a chance, there's so many different versions out there. If you come across a copy that's easy to get, I'd say it's worth getting. If it's hard and expensive, it's probably not worth getting. So there's that.
Okay. Classic art, or members only. I think we both played the Japanese version of it, right?
I've played both now.
With
yeah.
Big Ben, the Japanese.
Yeah.
Those cards are so funny. For me, classic art is a classic D tier. Something that the betting of it, because there's so many cards that are out, understanding how things are going to shake out just feels so opaque to me in a way that I don't want to dig into it more to understand it better. It just feels kind of slow, kind of plodding, kind of punishing in a way that was surprising to me. And then I don't know. I can't, maybe this is a matter of me just not getting it, but it's something that I don't want to put in the work to get.
I think that's fair. For me, it's a C tier card game, though. I think you're right. It's a little bit slower and more subtle than most card games out there, especially modern card games. And so it's not flashy in any way or form, especially compared to other. It's a betting game at its core, right? You're betting like how many colors of each, or how many cards of each suit are in everybody's hands, and you know what's in your hand, and you're trying to, based on what people are betting or playing out, you have to play out cards each turn, and you can possibly bet as well each turn if you want to. You're trying to figure out what other people are having their hands, right? And so it's very subtle in the sense that you don't want to give away too much information, but you also want to get as much information as you can from what other people are giving you. But I've played this at least 2 times now between the old version and classic art, and I think it's a really good card game. And the betting is fun, just the subtlety to it of like, do I bet big and potentially lose my betting token for several rounds before it comes back to me, or do I play it more conservative and just try to slowly inch my way up the tracks? And the fact that you have to do really well in a certain suit, you have to have so many good bets before you start scoring on that color. There's some really interesting stuff going on there. It's just nothing that's going to blow anybody away.
Yeah.
So for me, it's C tier. It's solid. It's good.
I think that's totally. I think one of my biggest problems with it is you're betting on how many cards people have rather than what they'll play. Like the amount of cards that you don't play is so little that it feels, I don't know. I'd prefer it if, you played your hands down until you had 2 or 3 cards left, and those ones didn't get played, and it was just a
little more control.
A little more control, maybe like one less suit then. But I'm okay with it there.
Cool. Next one on the list we have, it's been known by different versions, but have you played the older version?
Colossal Arena, yes. I've got opinions on the 2 versions.
Okay. So I've only played Equinox, but I will give you my opinion on that. I think this is an Oh, okay. There are caveats here, but I think this is an A tier Knizia game. I have it ranked pretty high. I think this is a really excellent betting game for a variety of reasons. And one of the biggest one probably is that you could just be so mean in this game. And I love mean games because each round you're putting out values to each, you're assigning values to each creature, and other players can come in and overlap your value and change it with the card from their hands. And whichever, once the whole row is filled, one of those creatures, the lowest valued one at the moment, gets eliminated. And then you play through multiple rounds until there's only a few creatures left. And you're making bets on them along the way as far as which one's going to survive. But the other thing that's cool is that if you are the lead bettor on that creature, then you get to use their ability every time you play their card. And that allows for some really cool tactical maneuvers. I think Equinox is a beautiful production. Very nice artwork. The stones are so satisfying to handle, the betting stones. The cards are way too big. The box could be smaller. And it takes up a lot of table space. And I think that's what hurts it for a lot of people. But if you have a big enough table, I mean, it's honestly not an issue at all. I mean, it's annoying to shuffle them and to handle them, but because they're Tarot sized cards and there's so many cards, they shouldn't be Tarot sized.
No,
but
no.
For me, it's so fun. I think it's best at probably 3-ish, 3 or 4 maybe. And it's actually really good at 2. I've played it at 2 players. 5 is a lot, but I still enjoyed it at 5. It's just you have less control. Like every decision matters in 5 because you may only have one shot to help that creature survive a round. So yeah, that's my take on Equinox.
I agree with you. I think it is a really, really fun betting play game. One that I've watched more than I've played, because I took my copy of Colossal Arena with me on a dental relief trip that I volunteered for with my job down to Guatemala. And we were in San Martin, which is like just a little village, middle of nowhere. So in the evenings, we had nothing to do except play the 3 card games that I brought. And one of them was Colossal Arena. And like the guys that I was playing with got so into it, and it was incredible. It was so great. And I like the betting in here a lot more than in classic art, because I think you bet a lot looser because you know less and things are less certain. And the shared incentives of, I bet on this, okay, let's keep it alive, or I'm going to betray you even though it'll cost me a point. And for me, I think Colossal Arena gets the leg up, even though I kind of low-key hate the art in Colossal Arena. I hate how big the cards are in Equinox, significantly more.
Yeah, if that's a big factor for you, I could see you still people opting for Colossal Arena. I think I prefer Equinox though, just because there are more abilities, there's more variety there that they came up with. But yeah, you're right. It's definitely a couple notches above classic art, and they scratch a similar itch. So even though classic art is like, I'm happy to play that game, I'd much rather play Equinox because it's a betting card game, but much more flavorful. So.